All right, good evening, everybody. Isaac Schroeder, agronomy sales specialist with Superior Ag. You're gonna have to bear with me. The AV here is not working, so I'm just gonna have to talk really loud. So, get started here. We're gonna talk about fertility today. So, who all is growing more corn now than what they were 10 years ago? Hopefully, pretty well everybody, right? So now, is everybody putting on the same amount of fertilizer that they did 10 years ago? Hopefully that answers no. Hopefully we're putting on a lot more. So these boxes over here represent 250 bushels of corn. You may say, hey Isaac, you're crazy. I don't raise 250 bushel corn, but I'd bet most of you in this tent here, at some point in time going across the field, your yield monitor hits 250 bushel. So in some place or another, you're taking off 250 bushel corn. So we've got jugs up here on each side of the table. So what we've got DAP on that side, potash on this side. This signifies what we're removing when we take off 250 bushel corn. So there's about 200 pounds of potash and 200 pounds of DAP over there. So when we grow corn, where's that corn going? It's not going back to the field. We're taking it to the elevator, and it's going down the river and who knows where. There's a few of you I know feed it to livestock, and then, yeah, those nutrients might come back to the field, but ultimately at the end of the day, most of that corn is going to someplace else, and we're never going to see it again. So we just need to make sure, we're putting back what we take off. The soil is a finite resource, so there's not an unlimited amount of fertilizer in there. Yeah, can we get by a year or two? Fertilizer is really expensive right now. Last year, corn prices weren't the greatest. So yeah, we may cut back a little bit, but just know at some point in time, we're going to have to put that back if we're going to keep growing big yields. Gonna switch gears here a little bit. So before we worry about fertilizer, what do we worry about? This side over here should give you a hint. It's lime, right? pH. So if our pH isn't right, our fertilizer does us no good. This chart right here, it gives this green box right here. It's in between 6.2 and 7.3 pH. What do we like about that range, which is typically where we grow crops? You can see most of these are where the bar is the widest and then the nutrient's green. So that just kind of means that those are most available right there in that range, which is a lot of times why we grow crops at those pH ranges. So one thing you'll notice here, so as the pH goes down, a few nutrients like iron become more available. But then we also have phosphorus that becomes less available. So what's the reasoning behind that? As iron becomes more available, it actually ties up the phosphate in your soil, and it creates a rock that takes then to get years to weather down and break apart again before your phosphorus is ever available again. So that's why we like to keep the pH here in this nice range, typically between 6.5 and 6.8. So this side over here looks like a big circle with a bunch of arrows going everywhere. Just to simply explain this, all these nutrients affect all the other ones. So you see calcium here, it affects manganese, potassium, iron, all these different nutrients. So if we get one of these out of balance or don't have enough of one of these, it's going to affect all the other ones in that circle. So just because we're missing, we might be only missing one piece of the puzzle, and it could be affecting everything. Need that one, Vanna. So this here is a corn biomass accumulation chart. So this says, when we finish the season, there's going to be 21,000 pounds of dry matter out there in that cornfield at the end of the season. If we're growing 250 bushel corn, that 21,000 is probably out the window. We're probably closer to 28,000. But there's a few takeaways. The graph looks the same. A few takeaways I take from this chart. Once we hit this grain growth phase, V8, V10, we start sucking up a lot of stuff and building a lot of that factory of the corn plant. As you can see, that first part, we're sticking it all into the stalk and the leaves, which are these two green areas right here. Then when we get to tassel right here, we start switching gears. You can see we don't get any more stalk or leaf tissue. Then we start switching over to the grain and the cob. And as you can see, we kind of slide backwards a little bit in the stalk and the leaf tissue. Anybody know why that might be? Yep, so we're moving some of this dry matter out of the stalk up into the ear. That's why, get into the end of season, September and stuff, some of your stalks start getting brittle and things. It's because we're taking some of that mass out of them stalks, trying to feed those babies to make the ear grow. All right, now we're going to talk about a few individual nutrients here. So nitrogen. This chart right here, we're signifying 220 to 240 bushel yield corn. So to grow that much corn, we're going to take up in the plant 256 pounds of actual nitrogen. So if you think of that in urea terms, that's well over 500 pounds. Now typically, there's not a lot of us putting that much on. So we're getting it from other sources in the soil, whether it be organic matter or stalks breaking down, things like that. But we're only taking away 148 units of nitrogen. So we're taking up way more in the plant than what we're actually removing. So a lot of that's staying in the stalk and in the leaves, the fodder. Nitrogen's taken up in two different forms. So you got a negative form, nitrate, you got a positive form, ammonia. So we really like to keep it in that ammonium form because it's positively charged and it's stuck to the negative soil colloids. The negative form is subject to leaching and then denitrification and different things, so it's kind of we would prefer it in the positive form. Nitrates, like I said, it's mobile in the soil. Ammonium is not. They're both mobile in the plant, so once the plant takes it up, it will actually reallocate it from the bottom of the stalk and take it to the top. So if we see nitrogen deficiency in a cornfield, it's going to be a yellowing. It's going to start in the bottom of the leaves because it's mobile, and it's going to be right up that midrib. As you can see, a high percentage of our plant early on in the season is actually nitrogen. So anywhere from 4 to 5% of that plant is actually going to be nitrogen at the beginning of the season. So it's a big part of what that actual plant and the dry matter composition of that plant. And here, we use nitrogen all season long. Nitrogen's really important as far as within the plant. It's a building block for amino acids. Amino acids control a lot of the processes within the plant, and then they go on to build proteins. So nitrogen's kind of slow takeoff at first as far as uptake, and then it just, right when we hit green growth, it shoots up. We take up a whole bunch. But don't forget this part up here, because a lot of people forget about nitrogen once we get to tassel. Well, we still got a lot of nitrogen up here that we're going to uptake yet to fill out that ear. So just make sure we don't forget about it at the end of the season. So phosphorus, as you can see here, so unlike nitrogen, our uptake is not as high, but our removal is almost as high as our uptake. So a big portion of our phosphorus that's in the plant actually goes into the grain and into the ear. So with that being said, most of our phosphorus that the plant uptakes is actually going to get taken off the field. So this jug right here has got about 14 pounds of DAP in it. So this 14 pounds of DAP signifies when we get into this grain growth phase right here, that plant is going to need this much DAP every day to survive and grow. So that's quite a bit if you ask me, just for one day for the corn crop. So phosphorus is taken up as an orthophosphate, a negative ion there. It is not mobile in the soil. So phosphorus, pretty well where you put it is where it's going to be. It's said to move an inch or less a year. So if we put it all in a band or somewhere away from the seed, it's not going to move over to the seed like a nitrogen will. It is mobile in the plant like nitrogen, so deficiencies will again show up on the bottom part of the plant, and they'll show up as a purpling or red, kind of a reddish color at the bottom of the plant. Sufficiency ranges and tissue samples, so we're not talking pounds anymore like nitrogen. We're only a third to kind of a 6/10 of a pound, so not near as much in the plant, but nonetheless any less important. Phosphorus, you can see, it's kind of more important early in the season. So phosphorus is responsible for cell division a lot and cell elongation. So it's going to be a lot of what gets that plant growing that leaves, getting it to shoot up, growing the stalk and all that. So uptake for phosphorus is kind of gradual all season long. You know, we take a little bit up kind of every day, and it's just kind of gradual. There's no real peaks or valleys like nitrogen. All right, so potassium. So potassium, similar to nitrogen, we're going to uptake a lot more than what we actually remove. So potassium, we actually remove a fairly small amount. So a lot of that reason is a lot of your potassium is going to be found in your stalks and your leaves. So not a lot of it moves over to the grain. And then this jug here, it doesn't look like much more, but this is actually close to 25 pounds of potassium that plant's going to uptake per day. So potassium weighs quite a bit more than DAP, so like I said, it's quite a bit more that the plant needs during that grain growth phase. Like phosphorus, it's not mobile in the soil, so it's going to pretty well stay where it gets put for the most part. It will move just a hair more in certain situations, but for the most part, it's going to stay right where you put it. Once again, it's mobile in the plant, so the deficiency is going to show up at the bottom of the plant, and it's going to be yellowing that's going to go around the outside perimeter of the bottom leaves. Sufficiency ranges on the tissue samples, once again, we're up in, you know, kind of 3 to 4.5, 3 to 4% ranges. And potassium, once again, like I said, we're growing that factory going in the stalk and the leaves, so during grain growth phase, that's when that's really important. It's not as important there later on in the season. And you can see here by the uptake curve, I mean, we just take up a boatload of it here during grain growth, and then it kind of tapers off. All right, switching gears again. Now we're going to talk about a micronutrient here. So rather than talking in pounds per acre, now we're talking in ounces per acre. So way less that we need. And with this, you know, like I said before, just because it's in ounces per acre instead of pounds per acre, it's no less important. It's just we need a lot less to make the plant happy. It's not mobile in the soil, not mobile in the plant, so the deficiency is going to show up in the top part of the plant. In the tissue samples, it actually shows up in parts per million instead of a percentage of the plant. So once again, a lot smaller amounts, and it's really needed early in the season because it helps with some of the enzymatic processes of getting the seed germinated and things like that. So it's going to be responsible for getting that seed off and to a good start. And you can see here we take up kind of a lot during grain growth, and then it just kind of tapers off the rest of the season. All right, so now we're going to kind of switch gears once again, and for lack of better terms, we're going to start talking about Jason's bug in a jug. So what we're going to talk about is with the bug in the jug, there's a lot of companies out there that's got really good marketing departments that come out and say, hey, if you put a gallon of my product on, you don't need any fertilizer. Well, that's all great for maybe a year or two, but eventually, like I said before, you're taking off this much fertilizer per acre per year, and you're not putting any back. So there's only so much in the soil that you can get a hold of, and eventually you're gonna dive off the cliff and run out of materials. So a couple of these products that we've started testing kind of involve nitrogen. And I want to preface this by saying we're not saying don't try these products at all. Just be very cautious and make sure we're putting them in trial situations to where we can try to figure them out. Because we are testing some of these products and trying to figure them out ourselves. So Envita on corn, this is a bacteria that acts similar to like a soybean nodule and is going to form a symbiotic relationship with the corn plant and give it nitrogen. So we did 15 trials over the last couple years. We actually saw a 2.8 bushel positive yield response and a win rate 87% of the time. So good data, we got some response out of it, but for the cost of the product and what we're getting out of it, we're still not super excited about it. So we want to continue testing these types of products, but this one didn't get us super excited.
What's the cost of that?
So somebody earlier told me that it was around 10 bucks an acre. So if you get 3 bushels back, yeah, you're getting a return, but it's not, most of the time we say, you know, we want to at least double our money. We're not quite there yet, so. Maybe with today's prices, we're getting close, but. So here we've got Pivot Bio. So any of you that listen to any kind of ag programs or anything has probably heard of marketing something or another on this Pivot Bio. So with this, over the last couple years, we did 20 different trials. We actually saw a negative response to yield, and then the win rate was, you know, half the time we were good, half the time we were bad. So with this, some of these trials we did like they said. So Pivot Bio actually recommends dropping they say if you drop your actual nitrogen that you use by 30, 40 pounds to the acre, their product works better. Well, according to our data, that didn't work. Now, not everybody in here did that. Some of the people in this trial actually kept the same amount of nitrogen that they would typically put on and then added this product to it. But according to our data, we're still waiting and seeing testing. And then also, the University of Illinois here published some similar data to what we found. So they actually did nitrogen rates at 0 pounds per acre, 40, 80, 120, and 200. And then they had proven in added to that and no proven in. So as you can see, dry matter, so pounds of plant, there was no big difference in dry matter accumulation with the maybe exception of one trial. And that also equated over here to yield, where most of the yields were pretty well the same. So, like I said, we don't want to throw all these out of the window. In fact, we're testing another one this year. So we've got a product called Nutrition N that's actually applied foliar, and we did several trials on that, and we should have a lot of good data back on that this fall. So don't want to throw them completely out of the window. We want to say proceed with caution and make sure that we're testing all these products and not just going and putting them on every acre. So with that, we've got a fair amount of time left here, so are there any questions? Not everybody at once. Yes?
So the last data sheet, it said it didn't change much compared to the Pivot Bio or the proven in. How much cheaper, or what's the price difference in those if there's not much variation? Like, you understand what I'm saying?
So you're trying to say so this here they did in addition to, so it wasn't it was at every level they did 0 pounds of nitrogen, and then they had proven in and no proven in. So, you know, the cost here, or the difference here, would just be the extra cost of the proven in. It wouldn't be, hey, we're leaving out nitrogen and adding the proven in. Follow me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, if you had ideal conditions as far as rainy, moisture, and weather, temperature, and everything, when would be the optimal time to have your second split application of nitrogen to maximize your availability for your field?
Yep. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. It's how much did we put on the first time? When did we put the first time on? Is it stabilized? You know, all those things, how much rain have you gotten? All those factors are going to play into it. I can say if we've got enough up front, the later we can delay that, like I said, we're using nitrogen all the way up into the end of the corn plant's life cycle. The later we can delay that and not run out on the front end, because we don't want to run out on the front end, because we can hurt ourselves really fast there. But as late as we can delay that and still get it done, and not get walking on that line of, hey, if we get a week's rain event here, we're going to run out of nitrogen. The later we can delay it, the better off we are. Any other questions? We still got a couple minutes here, so.
Any questions? I had some.
I do have one. I've been
Yeah.
a couple field days, and I'm starting to hear copper come in as something we're needing to add for a micronutrient. You heard what is copper doing for us, and what does that benefit us?
So copper, in our tissue samples, we typically don't see copper deficiency in corn. We see a lot of copper deficiency in soybeans. So copper you got to be really careful with, because the most common source that we put on is copper sulfate. And copper sulfate's actually a killer, so we got to watch how much we put on. So you got to be really careful. You know, all of our recommendations come back from Winfield, and they're going to say 10 to 12 ounces. I'm going to tell you that's too much. So probably somewhere in that 4 to 6 ounce range is where a lot of our guys are. But yes, copper's very important in soybeans as far as.
Where are we starting to see I mean, I've not heard of that before. Maybe I just haven't listened, but what's changed that we're having that deficiency now?
It's kind of like the corn example over there. Before, you know, we were growing 40, 50 bushel beans and we're happy. Now we're growing 60, 70. You know, some people in this tent's probably growing 90, 100 bushel beans. So as we push the plant harder, as we're pulling more things out, we're just starting to see more deficiencies. And we're paying more attention.
That usually is good.
Yes.
Currently, what are the proven micronutrients that have a payback that can be used, that we're using, or that are recommended?
So what I'm going to tell you is pull a tissue sample. So we test for several different micronutrients on tissue samples, and like I said, according to that circle, any one of them becomes deficient, we can hurt ourselves. So best recommendation is pull a tissue sample, see what we need, and then fix it.
That would be like if, so I'm going to kind of go a different analogy. If you go to the doctor and ask your doctor if you have high cholesterol, he can't tell. He's got to do blood work. So he's not going to put you on cholesterol medicine unless he does blood work. Same thing on the tissue sample.
Will some of that be too late to apply some of the micronutrients?
So we're pulling tissues all season long. You know, we start on corn at V4 and we can go all season long. And typically it takes about a week to get those turned around, so we can make amendments pretty quick as we're going throughout the season.
So don't apply micronutrients until you do tissue.
Yeah,
That would be our best recommendation. I mean, there are some packs out there that hit most of the highs and the lows, but our best recommendation is pull a tissue sample, see what you need, and then make an amendment.
Historical data, we know at certain growth stages on corn over the past 5 or 6 years, they're most likely probability going to be deficient in X, Y, and Z. So if you didn't want to pull a tissue sample, you could go that route, but your best bet is to know what you've got.
Is there a particular time to do the tissue sample?
So on beans, I think we want to see at least 3 trifoliates out. Corn, we're living off the roots up until about V4, so we don't like to go anywhere before V4. A good time to do it is right before we're getting ready to make that post pass, because we're already making the trip across the field, so those micros get the free ride across the field, so we don't have the extra cost of the extra application. Still got another minute or so another question or so? Or Todd, you said you had something?
I had a comment. We were talking there a while ago, and somebody had brought in a jug of something they wanted sprayed, and it was the analysis was 1-0-1, and it was the purpose of this product was to drive nitrogen and potassium efficiency in the plant, and they put 5 ounces per acre on. I kind of look at that. I'm like, I don't really know, even if it only costs $1, that it's. I mean, there's nothing in the jug, right? I mean, so maybe there's just a lot of things. I'm not saying it just doesn't work. I'm not saying there's not more to it, but there are a lot of things that we need to make sure you're paying attention and looking at these things, because I don't know, some of them are just 2 plus 2 don't add up to 4 sometimes. So
Well, and a lot of them you find they don't even have a label. It's just, hey, this thing works great, and it's a proprietary blend of products. So
that's what Isaac was trying to show with the Invita and the Pivot Bio. You know, we're looking at these things. We're not sticking our head in the sand to see, trying to figure new things out. But we certainly aren't gonna let you have a train wreck till we figure out whether they really work or not, and how they work, and when they work, and why they work.
Absolutely.